you're you, and that's beautiful, and that's how life is. You don't need them to change, and you don't need to feel quote unquote better about yourself in comparing, yourself to them in some way, shape, or form.
Welcome to the Beautifully Broken podcast. I'm your host, Freddie Kimmel, and on the show we explore the survivor's journey, practitioners making a difference, and the therapeutic treatments and transformational technology that allow the body to heal itself. Witness the inspiration we gain by navigating the human experience with grace, humility, and a healthy dose of mistakes. Because part of being human is being beautifully broken. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Beautifully Broken podcast. We're here on a beautiful morning with Jonathan DePotter. Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Freddie. I'm excited to have another conversation with you.
Me too. So we've touched base already, but Jonathan, you're doing some amazing work with plant medicine and retreats and healing the spiritual body, facilitating this for other people. I want to get into the work and behold retreats, but I would love to hear how you got into this. And has this been a lifelong obsession with the healing arts, or is this relatively new?
Great setup. Thank you. It's actually been a very interesting and humbling journey. I grew up in Hawaii with pretty hippie parents. So I was always surrounded by, pretty liberal people. And in Hawaii, unfortunately, there's a lot of substance abuse. And so, of course, I went completely the opposite direction. I was very anti anything new age, anything hippie, and I was completely anti-substance. And I grew up, super rational and kind of rejecting anything spiritual. And so of course, then entered the corporate world after university and spent the majority of the past 15 years in the corporate world. And lo and behold, about 5 years ago now, I found the courage and the wisdom to attend a plant medicine retreat. And wow, I mean, it so substantially changed me. It so substantially changed my mind in relation to plant medicine. And I'm glad you did call it plant medicine as opposed to psychedelics, because I think there's, the language around that is important because there's so much baggage. I think particularly in the US, there's just so much baggage in relation to the word psychedelics. It's just so unhelpful to the incredible potential of these things. So it's been something that I've avoided for my entire life until about 5 years ago. And it's just made such a dramatic improvement to the quality of my everyday life and my self-understanding and in my ability to lead a meaningful and fulfilling life. And it's also, I said it was humbling before in terms of the personal work for myself, but also going back to my parents and being like, all right, look, you guys had some of this stuff completely right, and I had some of this stuff completely wrong. So it's been kind of one of those full circle stories, if you will.
That's incredible. So what were you doing for a vocation? What was your passion as far as work goes?
Yeah, I mean, now I recognize that it wasn't a passion, but I was pretty good at it. So I've spent most of the past 10 years working in management and strategy consulting. So I was working for Accenture for many years in Hong Kong, working with telecommunications and technology clients like Huawei and other regional multinationals. And it was great work. It was super, high energy, big clients, big deals, large transformation programs. I had a team of about probably 150 at peak. And there was always the next thing, the next promotion to pursue, the next client to land, the next project to save from troubled waters. And I had all the objective success measures that we typically look for in modern life. And at the time, I thought it was fulfilling work. I had great friends. I had a great girlfriend. Life was good. I was traveling around Asia, whenever I was able to take some time from work, and life was good. But I just, after 5 years of kind of in the rat race in Hong Kong, and it's such a high paced city, I just felt like something was missing. And I fundamentally didn't know what that thing was. I decided to take a year off for myself. And that was the time at which I found my way to an ayahuasca retreat. And just begun, the last 5 years has really been a journey of self-discovery and also deepening my understanding of this field.
It's funny, me labeling it medicine is new in probably the last 8 years, 9 years. I grew up in a very rural town in upstate New York where some of these substances in different forms were available, different types of psychedelics and mushrooms, if you will, and of course LSD. And I would watch them kind of find their way into the high school population with certain human beings, and I would really like watch it change people. I had always been very scared of quote unquote. It's funny, I just wrote about this yesterday. I'm writing a book, and I wrote about being terrified of like sex and drugs because of the Reagan administration growing up in the 80s, the barrage of media that like sex is dirty, it's awful, all drugs are terrible, you're going to die. You had the girl jumping into the concrete pool without the water in it. I mean, I just remember being all drugs are bad. And again, to watch certain members of my high school class just be, pulled out of the stream that every other fish is swimming down. And I'm not going to label that good or bad, but I did watch it have a very intense effect on their life because they were playing with something very, very powerful. And again, I'm not saying it's good or bad. I watched, now looking back in hindsight, there were no guides. There was no anybody to tell you how to do this. It was like a recreational substance as opposed to something that can give you this spiritual transformation. I'd love to hear about your first experience. It was transformational, it was magical. Could you give us a little bit of the story and just let us know what happened for you?
Yeah, happy to share. It's funny as you were sharing about friends or people in high school and seeing, the effects upon them. Also witnessed, groups within my high school, and it's difficult for me to say that they're in a good place, collectively.
Yeah.
Some that have landed in an okay place, but it's difficult to say that that's had like a really positively profound impact upon their lives. So I think there's something in that we can come back to.
Yeah.
My own first experience, was just completely overwhelming. I was undereducated. I was underprepared. I was well physically cared for, but not very well spiritually cared for. And that's not even something that I knew was important leading into the retreat. I was fortunate in that I went to what is still today recognized as one of the leading retreat centers. But unfortunately, they're not necessarily doing this work at a high level. And so I think, that's part of what we are trying to do with Behold Retreats is to guide people towards, really, really high quality experiences. And so the experience itself was profound. The first ceremony was completely overwhelming. I was in Peru in the Sacred Valley, which is just an incredible place to do this work. I was there with two friends, and the first ceremony for me was just overwhelming. Like, I was shown so many things. There was so much going on. There's a lot of physical and emotional purging that's taking place. And it was so overbearing that it was difficult for me to make too much sense of it from the first night's experience. The second night, I got a lot more out of it. I was shown a lot more in relation to my mindsets and my behaviors and how that was really limiting me from fulfilling my potential. I was shown, powerful emotions of people around me and shown how I can affect those people for better and for worse. And so it's beautiful. You see some of the best moments of your life where, your mom was watching you graduate or do something beautiful for another person. And then equally things where you just haven't turned up as you know that you should. And, you see shame on the face of your father or guilt on the face of your mother because you just didn't turn up in that moment. And so, in terms of an experience that can provide you guidance in terms of what's keeping you from your potential, sometimes it's so difficult for us to see what those things are, and just to have access to something that literally tells us what's keeping us from achieving the next level in our life is just incredible when you think about what that represents. So, it was an incredible experience. I've always had a great relationship with my parents, despite what I said before, in terms of us having differences of opinion. We always had a great relationship, but this was even a foundation to even deepen the relationship that I have with my parents, which was really beautiful because I shared with them all of my experiences and what it meant for me, what it meant for our relationship or how I saw our relationship. And I also just kind of was able to put aside a whole bunch of baggage in relation to, we all have things that we associate. Maybe my mom's not so good with money, so then I get to feel better about myself because I'm a little bit better with money, or whatever it is it might be. But it's like, no, your mom's just your mom and your dad's just your dad, and you're you, and that's beautiful, and that's how life is. You don't need them to change, and you don't need to feel quote unquote better about yourself and comparing yourself to them in some way, shape, or form. It was super powerful. But then what happened was, a month later, I was back to who I was before. That's the honest truth. Like I'd had this really profound experience, and again, was reasonably well cared for during the retreat. At the end of the retreat, they're just, they hand you a piece of paper and they're like, oh, you should probably try meditation, and we wish you all the best. And I was like, okay, great, thank you. And I didn't really know, first experience, I didn't really know that I definitely should have had more support and guidance around such an experience to help me integrate that into my everyday life. I went into that experience as an atheist, and I came out going, okay, there's something else here that I've completely overlooked and been unwilling to even consider was a possibility. And so that's where I think, there's so much of this plant medicine work that's happening now. But from what I've seen, I think the overwhelming majority of practitioners do not know what they're doing. They're typically very nice people. They speak well. They have their hearts in the right place, but they don't necessarily have the skills that are required to do this work at a high level. The second component is that people come out of these retreats so much clarity, so much purpose, so much meaning, and then a month later, they've lost 90% of it. And so there's a lot of work to be done between the end of a retreat and a month or two later, when you're benefiting from, neurogenesis, the new neurons, the new neuronal connections, the motivation, you've got it all there. You need to embed that into everyday life, because this isn't about seeing unicorns in the jungle. It's not about the plants at all. It's using the plants as this incredibly powerful tool in order to elevate your consciousness, in order to break through the things that are holding you back, in order to quote unquote lead your best life. And these plants have an incredible potential to help people do that. But there's a lot of people who are doing these things and feeling like they're making progress. And this also, by the way, reflects my own journey in this. I felt like I was making great progress for years, but in reality, it wasn't until I found some really expert practitioners that helped me see that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. What a beautiful story. It's just, I just think there's so many elements when you're talking about you're in the rat race, you're lost, you're going back to spend time in nature and to use nature, to use the plants, to use the resonant vibration of the planet. It's offered up this very special route, this unique route that can only be processed in one way and turns an atheist into a believer. It's powerful. It's powerful. And what I would love to kind of break down is, so you did on your first experiment, you did ayahuasca. Can you just go into a little bit about that specific plant and why that's used, how that's different from, we'll say, like a psychedelic mushroom, or we can kind of break down some of the different elements that people would use on a plant medicine retreat?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. So ayahuasca is a combination of two plants that are brought together and then brewed for an extended period of time. And it's obviously grown in popularity in the Americas, and it's the buzz of the town. It's an incredibly powerful medicine. I'm one of those people who is attracted to the more powerful experiences, but that's not necessarily the right thing or the right place for everyone to start. I would probably, on balance, unless you feel a real resonance with ayahuasca as a plant medicine, I would probably, on balance, encourage people to think about a psilocybin or a San Pedro retreat as a place to start. Ayahuasca is definitely like, you're really preparing for a real journey. And so the medicine itself, I mean, one of our advisors, Dale Millard, he's an ethnobotanist. He's done some of the work in relation to isolating compounds from ayahuasca. And so he's found there's 463 individual compounds within an ayahuasca medicine. And obviously, those are two different plants from two different places that are brought together. So each ayahuasca brew can be different than the next. And there's actually three different ayahuasca vines. There's one that's described as a red, a black, and a yellow. And so part of the reason that the scientific world isn't kind of all over ayahuasca is not because it's not powerful, it's because it's made up of so many different compounds. So, in the West, we've kind of got this obsession with compound isolation. We don't want to use cannabis. We want to separate out CBD and THC and find that single molecule. And it's like, well, we've got 463 here in ayahuasca. So good luck, trying to map the interrelationship between those compounds and our incredibly complex selves. So it's a very powerful medicine. It has an effect on body, mind, and soul. And, again, the soul part is something I would have laughed at 5 years ago, but that's without a question today for me. Sometimes the way that I articulate the effects that these medicines can have for people is often we've got a stage of healing to do. We've got a stage of growth and then transcendence. And I'm an ex-consultant, right? So I can't help myself but to use frameworks. And then you've also got experiences that relate to yourself. You've got experiences that relate to other people. And you've got experiences that relate to our broader natural world and our broader universe. And so everyone's journeys and everyone's path between those things can be different. But often you will start with the healing experiences, move into the more the growth, and then the transcendence beyond the self and beyond everything. Yeah. So, incredibly powerful medicine. I think it takes some time for people to begin to work with it effectively because it is so overpowering. It's got a strong purgative effect. And so, it's pretty common for people to be vomiting from the experience, particularly early on. There's a lot of toxins in our bodies as a result of the lifestyles that we live and the food that we eat and ... And so ayahuasca doesn't play nice with those and moves them out pretty quickly. And so it's a pretty intense experience.
Has anybody ever studied that as far as like the detoxification effects on the body before and after a session? Probably not.
There is research that's happening for ayahuasca. I do know that. One of the things that we are actually looking for is the right academic partner, because I think we're going to be sitting on quite an interesting data set for our business because it's multi-country, multi-practitioner, multi-medicine. And so we'll be able to see some interesting patterns emerge in terms of improvements to quality of life between medicines, et cetera, which I think is quite interesting and exciting. But in my mind, given the potentiality of ayahuasca, it's not being sufficiently researched at the moment because it just doesn't fit our Western medical system. Another one of our advisors, she described our efforts in the US as, we've got this broken medical system and now we have this modality that works and we're trying to make all sorts of compromises to this modality in order to fit it into this kind of broken medical system. And I thought, that's quite an interesting observation. And I think it's got some truth to it. Like, is it worth making all of those compromises to get it in so that people can get treatment? Absolutely, 100%. But that's, part of the reason why we're seeing MDMA and synthetic psilocybin is that it allows for, single molecule and dosage control. So our system is all about being able to control for variables such that you can measure, and 463 molecules, you just impossible.
Yeah, there's something we lose in the scientific method. Personally, I think we lose some of the magic. There is something very special to trust, faith, ceremony, being fully on board with an acceptance that you don't understand the whole experience, that you give it over. And that I know that's counterintuitive to how we like things to be standardized so we can repeat, rinse, wash, and repeat. Yeah. But again, there's magic. Anytime I have ever been in a situation with any of these elements, mostly psilocybin, which is the good old magic mushroom, I've been absolutely blown away. I was like, there is another world happening. This is not something brought on because some of the truths that you see and how powerful, to just talk about the ego death for a second. I remember my last experience. Sorry, mom and dad. Yes, I've done drugs. I don't know if I've ever talked about this on the podcast. My last experience, grieving my car payment and my career and my bills and my friends. And I'm not saying goodbye as you're taken to this other world. Heartbeats, breath work, breathing, human bodily function, and it going away. And for an extended period of time, like you said, you are on a journey where you're incredible vision, past lives. I know that sounds so out there for people, but I did Broadway music theater for many years, a tap dancer. And I was all of a sudden touching my knees where my knees would hurt. And I was seeing these vaudeville tap dancers like from the 20s. And I was like, I felt their knees and my knees. It was so crazy and amazing. And then all of a sudden it was like, zoop, you're like in the perfect moment. You're like back in your body. You're processing the experience.
Beautiful.
But there's so much magic there. Again, so important to have a guide to reintegrate, because I'll be honest, that was right before, fortunately or unfortunately, it was like the weekend that the world shut down from the pandemic. So it was a lot to process going on along with that. I just can't make it so strongly worded that everybody here, that you have to do these things with expert guides, with people that really know what they're doing. In fact, even month 2, month 3, month 4, to always have somebody to go reach out to and kind of answer these questions, which kind of brings me to my next question. What does it look like to train somebody, or how do you go about finding the right guides, practitioners to facilitate this work for your specific retreat?
Yeah, so there's a couple different elements that play into that. One is the rational. So we look for people who have done a lot of this work. You can't get past experience. So I think pretty much all of our facilitators, except for maybe one, are over 50. So they've just got decades and decades of experience. You know, one of the gentlemen we work with in Ecuador, he's a real man of the plants, also an ethnobotanist, and 30 years under his maestro, who is now 102 years old, still going.
Wow.
And so, you know, he's bringing some wisdom for sure. And, you know, so part of it is the rational. So, you know, how many ceremonies have you held? How many clients have you worked with? And, you know, connect me with some of those clients and all of those sorts of normal, you know, what are your protocols around safety? And we establish those across the broad sets of facilitators. But we like to understand, you know, what have they done when things have gone wrong? Things can go wrong with this work. And so it's, as you said, it's important that people have expert guidance and also have taken every possible safety precaution in the lead up. And, you know, the reality is that the overwhelming majority of this work is happening, well, 100% of this work is happening either illegally or in an unregulated context. So there are absolutely no standards for safety. There are absolutely no standards for care. There are standards out there, but whether or not an individual retreat center actually abides to those standards and uphold those standards is entirely at their discretion. Mm-hmm. And so there's just been incredible growth in this space over the years, and it's come at a cost of the quality of work. And, you know, a nice website and 5-star reviews is not necessarily a function of high quality work, because
you can buy those.
You can buy those. Yeah, that's a good point. I hope those people, I hope that, I really hope that people who are doing spiritual work are not buying reviews. That would be incredible.
Hope so. Yeah, you hope.
That would be something. Jesus Christ. But secondly, people actually just don't know what good looks like. Like, I was super grateful coming out of my first retreat experience, because I thought that was like what the first retreat experience should be. Mm-hmm. It was at least a year and many ceremonies later before I recognized, wow, those people didn't know what they were doing, even though it's consistently rated amongst the top retreat centers. And it's impossible. And I'm grateful there's some technology that's coming that's going to begin to correct this, because it's important that we do begin to take a data-oriented approach to the quality of outcomes, you know, the quality of life improvements that we're seeing from this work. And so, of course, the clinical trials that are ongoing for this work are evidencing that, but the vast majority of work is either underground or in countries where it's not regulated. So there's no requirements to fulfill any sort of standards that needs addressing like quickly. So I mean, in terms of answering your question, so there's the rational side, and then there's the spiritual side, which is like, all right, what is the level of, what we're looking for is ultimately what's the level of consciousness of the individual. And so what have been their spiritual experiences? What's their understanding of the way things are in the universe? And their level of consciousness is going to be reflected directly in their work. Like, there's no two ways about it. Like, as we raise in the levels of consciousness, then we begin to think about things and think about people from a very, very different perspective. So, you know, for me, when I was in my Hong Kong corporate life, it was all about, how do I get that next promotion? You know, what's the next holiday look like? It was all that normal, you know, modern life, ambitious stuff. And then as I began to work on myself more seriously, it was like, okay, it's not about me, it's about other people. And then as I even continued along that journey, it's like, it's actually not even about other people, it's about future generations, and other people are a part of that picture. And so the motivation, just as you do this work, it shifts, and it continues shifting, because you just begin to expand in terms of how you're thinking about what you can contribute and how you can contribute. So I think that's kind of, in terms of, how does someone go about finding a good guide? I would say, the marketing in me says come to behold retreats. But honestly speaking, I would say that I would try to find a way to listen to the people who are doing the work, if that's possible. So are they on a podcast? Yeah. Is there a way to understand the energy that those people are bringing? And again, this is quite challenging, right? Because for someone who doesn't know plant medicine work, it's very easy to meet well-spoken, well-intentioned people. But the healing work that's happening, the energetic work that's happening, is pretty ineffable. And it's difficult to find practitioners that are doing this work at a high level if you don't know what you're looking for.
Yeah. If we can talk about, you've mentioned a couple times, we've sort of touched on it, but Behold Retreats, I am going to say your special sauce, your collection of the ultimate experience, given guides, given location. Can we talk a little bit about kind of the recipe that is your brainchild that's creating these certain destinations, and how those work, and how somebody would get involved with one, how they would pay for it, all those good questions?
Yeah, sure. So I'll kind of split this into the non-plant element, which and then kind of the plant-related element. So this work it's not about the plants. The plants are incredible. They're so powerful. They have so much to share with us. They have so much to show us. But this is really, it's about mindset shifts. It's about aligning your body, mind, and soul. And it's about elevating your consciousness. Those are the outcomes that we're searching for. And when we use the plants in the right way, they can accelerate those outcomes in ways that are almost indescribable. And so, when we're speaking about mindset shifts, we're talking about, what are your current thinking patterns? How do you think about yourself? What is your predominant thinking patterns in relation to yourself? What is your predominant thinking patterns in relation to others? What is your predominant thinking patterns in relation to life itself? Is life happening for you, or is life happening to you? What is it that makes you emotional? When do emotions arise? When do you lose your patience? When do you get angry? Why is that? So a lot of self-discovery work. Typically, we do an 8-week guided program to help people really understand themselves in a deep way, and to help them, understand what negative thoughts, what negative behaviors, what negative patterns they have, so that through that process, you're beginning to really understand. I almost kind of think of this almost like a video game. When you're just entered a new space, you've got to do the outline in terms of the space that you're in. So you've kind of got to go do some exploratory work and be like, all right, well, this. And, the coaches and the guides, everyone thinks they're unique. And, many of us have some sort of a victim story of no, you don't understand. But it's like, no, trust me, I've seen it all, heard it all. You're not so different from anybody else. And so the qualified coaches and guides are like, look, you have a scarcity mindset. You need to break out of your scarcity mindset. You will become abundant once you break out of scarcity. It's like, no, but I don't have enough money. It's like, yeah, I know you. Trust me, I've had 100, 200, 300 clients that have broken through this problem before. Let's talk about your scarcity mindset. The moment we break out of scarcity, guess what? Things are going to be less scarce for you. There's a lot of kind of mind work in relation to that. So that's number one, the mindset shift. There's a number of those that are important for people in terms of all aspects of life: love, relationships, career, blah, 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 right? And then secondly, it's aligning body, mind, and soul, right? And so part of the work is trying to regain our neuroplasticity, right? And so the plants play a role there. Also reconnecting the body and the mind, strengthening the nervous system so that we're able to really feel that mind and body connection in a much deeper way. For me, that's been one of the most profound experiences. And, it's been a combination of meditative practices plus breath work, plus plant medicine. That's like, whoa, this is a very different connection than I'd ever thought was even humanly possible. And then also body, mind, and soul. And so beginning to feel the energetic body and to be able to work with that in your meditation meditation, in your breath work, in your movement practices. And then through that, once people have kind of begun to do some of that work, then we also bring them into the elevating of consciousness, because it's a bit of a spiral. It's a self-fulfilling cycle in terms of, okay, where are you in terms of your consciousness at the moment? And that's always a direct reflection of what are your problems in life. So if people tell you that, they've got a really high level of consciousness, but they've got relationship problems, they're not getting along with their problem, the boss is an asshole, it's just like, no, that's just fundamentally, that's not where you are. You're here, you're operating at this level, often we've got things that are hidden from us. We've got shame, we've got guilt, we've got fears that we may not even be conscious of that are actually holding us down. Then bringing the plants in, that's where they're so powerful, because they will unearth those things for us that are keeping ourselves down. And you could have asked me for 2 decades on a therapist's couch, how was your childhood? And I would have said, great, amazing. I had some bullying maybe in parts of my schooling, but I had a great childhood. I had loving parents that cared for me very much. The reality is that I had traumatic experiences as childhood that I had completely suppressed and repressed. And they weren't even necessarily such horrible things, but they were traumatic to me, And so the example I sometimes give is like, imagine a 5-year-old, walking in with mom. It's been a long day for mom, and the 5-year-old's carrying some groceries in, doing their little bit to help. And they drop the grocery bag and something breaks and falls and, what have you. And mom in that moment loses her patience, tired. And she says, look, just get out of the way. You never do anything right. Now, for a 5-year-old, they don't know what should take hold in their subconscious versus what should not. And so that takes hold in their subconscious. And the next day, when the child is at school playing ball with all the other kids, and she gets the ball, and in that moment, she plays back that message. You never get anything right. Just get out of the way. And she does. And all of a sudden, that's become a self-fulfilling cycle and fundamentally set this child on a different path. And so we all have experiences. I mean, that's such a minor transgression, right? But it can really have a major impact. And so it's very common for people to relive these sorts of experiences and to regain access to parts of their brain that they've suppressed and repressed away. So that's a very fundamental component to what plants bring to the table.
Incredible. How, like, nuts and bolts, getting granular, like if someone were to, I see on your website, by the way, your website is beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Somebody did some visioning and some intense interdimensional work. It just flows so nice. And I love the graphics of like the plants like growing, and there's a little movement in the birds. Anyways, everybody's got to check out behold-retreats.com. It's really, really, really good. And so if I go to this website and I say, because I want to get on a retreat, I said, maybe I want to plan this for 2021. It's also, let's talk about how we're going to do this in this new world. But if I hit this apply button, what does it look like for me to go do a retreat financially? And how much time do I need to carve out of my life to be able to make space for this?
Yeah, we're targeting leaders, people who are ready to listen to the plants and to take that very seriously. There are much cheaper retreats out there, absolutely. But again, for us, this isn't really about the plants. I know people who've done 2 decades of plants, and guess what? They're not doing so good. So it's not about the plants. It's about your mental, emotional state, your mind, body, and soul alignment, and moving you in the right direction. And so that's what we think has been missing from this space for too long. And so we're setting about to do something that's quite fundamentally different. The plants are a very exciting tool. Yep. But this is not about unicorns in the jungle. This is about you being a better person when you're stuck in traffic after a really shitty day. So to answer your question, so our process is relatively straightforward. One of the things that's different about us is that we really take the time to get to know our clients and to understand if we're a fit for one another. There's a lot of retreat centers out there that it's a bit of a hammer looking for a nail, right? If you're running retreat center X and I call you and say, here's my situation, are you the right guys for us? The answer is like, yeah, come on down. So we take the time to really understand where people are in life, what past plant medicine experience they've had, where they are in terms of mental health, life situation, what they're looking for out of the experience, what would be a huge win for our work together. And then on that basis, we begin to architect an experience in terms of who is the right guide for you. If you're suffering from CPTSD, that's one type of guidance. If you're someone who's looking for a deep healing experience, then that's another type of guidance. guidance. It can be even some of the physical illnesses that are out there can be cured through these experiences. Absolutely. And then some people are looking for growth or deeper spiritual connections. So again, based upon the needs of the individual, we kind of connect them with the right sort of guidance. I mentioned the program before and what we step through in terms of the program. That's a kind of guided experience with group coaching and Q&A sessions.
Does that happen before or the experience or after?
Both before and after. So the before is all around preparation, intention setting, and helping people get to know themselves a little bit better. And then after is really about integration and how to implement that so that you can improve the quality of everyday life. I think you meet a lot of people that are like, oh yeah, I went on an ayahuasca retreat. I'm going, and 2 months later, they're back on their next ayahuasca retreat. And you're like, it's kind of like, it's that detox. It's like the yo-yo dieting, right? You go, okay, I'm a great person. And then you slowly shift back into not being, and then you go, oh, I'm a great person again. And so it's like, nope, that's not it. We want every time you go to be a new foundation that you're very firmly grounded upon so that you're going to the next level and again, firmly grounded. And so, and then there's a retreat component, right? And so the retreats that we have are in Tulum, they're in Peru, they're in Costa Rica, they're in Ecuador, and also in Europe, in Netherlands predominantly at the moment. But we're also looking at some options in Portugal. So again, based upon the needs of the individual, what they're looking for in terms of what medicine is interesting for them, why is that interesting for them, how well educated they are.
Sure.
Yeah, we want to make sure that our clients are making fully informed decisions because that's really a big part of. We see our work is really as facilitating our clients through their own decision-making process and providing the right guidance and support around them to really maximize the growth potential.
Awesome. Incredible. Yeah, I would implore people to go check out the site. The pictures of the retreats and some of the locations you guys are using is just stunning. It's like the setting that you absolutely imagine that it would be. I have another question for you. So how often do you keep up with people that have had an experience through Behold? Do you kind of monitor their progress, or is there a way for people to keep in touch after they've gone through these groups together?
Yeah, we've established a community and it typically takes two forms. So we do a WhatsApp group for any of our intakes so that you get a little bit more familiarity. And then there's the broader community. And the motivation behind that is really to provide people the resources to continue their own work post-retreat. Because it's not like, okay, you come out of a retreat and then you just try and hang on to that baseline. There's so much that you can do without plans. And once you've gotten into the habits and the processes and the tools of spotting your own thinking patterns, of releasing emotions, of a daily practice so that you're journaling and committing to yourself, your dreams and what you're bringing into this world, that just becomes this dynamic that just builds upon itself exponentially over time. And that's really our message to anyone, is that your potential is exponential. Like, it is absolutely there. It is, the exponential is not just something that happens in Silicon Valley and for Google. Like, human potential is absolutely exponential. Plants can help you see that. And we think we can help guide people through that journey. So we're very, very excited, just getting started as a business, but we're super excited about the future.
Incredible. Yeah. It's so intriguing to me. And it looks like amazing work that you guys are setting up and really setting the stage for to do right. What about in 2020, 2021? We're in a very unique situation in the world where, of course, it's a very politicized situation in the world. And it looks like we're almost going into this second wave of lockdowns as we speak here, November 17th, 2020. How does that affect some of the work you're doing? I'm sure there are pockets of the world that are probably going on normal as normal can be. And then are you guys on pause right now as far as scheduling retreats and doing some of this work?
Yeah, so we've been hosting more private retreats than group retreats. For people who are in a position to do so, it's very easy for me to recommend to do this work privately. It's typically done in a group setting, but I've made all of my major breakthroughs in a private setting. And so, a lot of people are opting for that option these days. What's common in terms of a journey is that usually people are, at the outset, they're looking for a first experience in a group sort of a context. And part of that is kind of a feeling around safety and numbers. And also they're probably trying to be more cost effective for a first experience. So it's common for people to look for a group experience and then move into doing the work privately. And that's been my own journey. as well. But no, look, there are still people who are willing to travel. I think travel is going to change fundamentally. It's going to be much more of travel with purpose behind it versus the old school, fly and flop for a week in Cancun or what have you. So it's actually Americans who seem to be on average more willing to travel at this particular juncture than others. But in saying that, these medicine experiences do have a profound impact upon cellular health. And I think I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, right? Huge caveat in front of what I'm about to say. But I think part of what we're seeing in America has a relationship to underlying cellular health in terms of COVID impact, particularly from a dietary perspective. I think even there's a lot of people who look at surface level to be healthy, but the underlying diet means that the cellular health is just not there. And when the cellular health is not there, then viruses can have a much bigger impact than otherwise. Again, I am not a scientist, and caveat the crap out of what I've just said, but I do feel that. And I also, there was another tidbit that I wanted to share.
Yeah.
And I'd be happy to share this with you and your audiences. And because I know that part of your audience is probably listening in because of your own journey, Freddie, around cancer and how you've kind of come through that. There's a particular substance that's within ayahuasca that I think is of particular interest to anyone who, well, actually, I think it's interesting for everyone, but in particular, I think it's interesting for anyone who might be looking for alternative. Again, I'm not a doctor, do your own research,
Yes.
But the compound is called harmine. And there's a paper by one of our advisors who it's available through, distributors. I have absolutely zero horses in this race, but it's neurogenetic, number one. So it promotes the growth of new brain cells. The second is that it eradicates unhealthy cells. And then the third is, which is the most surprising thing, is it actually bonds and plays nicely with healthy cells. So you'll probably know this much better than I do, Freddie, that by the modern Western definition, I think all of the things that we have that eradicate cancer cells also eradicate healthy cells, which is the major problem that we have with the majority of cancer treatment. So again, I'm not prescribing or recommending any sort of form of treatment, but this molecule harmine that sits within ayahuasca seems to be very powerful and have a lot of potential that has yet to be realized from a medical perspective.
I've done some reading on that. It's really incredible. In a majority of the work I've done in the last 3 years around healing, I was always very granular. I was trying to eat food again. I was trying to, hack apart your intestines 3 times. I'm trying to walk again. I'm trying to detox my body from chemotherapy. Whatever it was very myopic and granular. And in the last 3 years, 2.5, I've started to look at the energetic body. We start to talk about the chakras, the bioenergetic field, and all of a sudden people are like, oh, you mean woo-woo Reiki. And now what I'm discovering is cell-to-cell communication, the integration of every system in the body. Again, not looking at this compartmentalized form of medicine. It's so powerful. And the evidence that we can make changes in 30 minutes as opposed to 90 days is evident in advanced biological testing. You can show that right now. This is not woo-woo. It's not out there. You can show incredible changes in the energetic body using frequency, using intention, using prayer in the moment that you want it to happen. And we're so in this again. We're boiling down all these components to one molecule where we can get a change in the chemical system. Downstream, we get maybe, after my 3 weeks of antibiotics, we get an effect in the microbiome. And that's just old. That is old information. It's changing very quickly.
Yeah.
The systems approach, to me, very much resonates with plant medicine. It's an effect on the whole system. And, you're talking about stirring up these old patterns and reprogramming and repatterning through this 8 weeks. It really resonates with me. I really look forward to doing some of this work in the proper setting with the proper guides. Awesome. At some point. I really do. And I also, I can see the work that you've done in speaking to you. That both times we've talked, just you have a clarity and you have a very clear light and a very clear focus around the words you're speaking and some of these intentions you're setting forth. So I applaud you for doing the hard work and breaking out of the rat race and being a guide for the collective. it's what everybody needs right now. We'll just go totally weird and fun. As you're saying this, what I think would be cool is if we could get everybody from the Supreme Court and Congress and the Senate and all our political leaders,
Yeah.
if we could take them in small groups away and do some of this plant medicine work. And I would love to see how people's votes changed. I would love to see, I mean, because what you're talking about, you're not talking about supplying medicine for the masses. And that's, at least this is what I'm hearing, is that you're really you're trying to take the leaders, some of the thought leaders, some of the people who hold quote unquote the keys to the castle, and up regulating them. It's going to have a downstream effect on the collective. And I mean, could you imagine?
Absolutely. And that's what we're, the way that I look at this is like, we are nature, right? And this is about reconnecting ourselves to our nature and to nature itself. And there's some really promising research that's coming from Harvard. That's actually, I understand it's coming from Harvard. It hasn't been released yet. That's going to show that it's not that these plants do interesting things to our brains. It's that our brains are interesting in large part because of these plants. So it's going to potentially very fundamentally change the nature of that conversation. And, I loved what you said in terms of, so at one end of the spectrum, the way I look at this is one end of the spectrum, we've got plants, we've got nature, we've got tribes still, indigenous tribes that are living in harmony with nature. At the end of the spectrum, we've got all sorts of, modern extremes, shall we say it. And so the focus of this work is actually to try to connect that end of the spectrum back around to what we are and who we are, our nature, which is nature. I think as we all individually do our own work, then that's what's going to unlock the collective, right? The way I look at this is, if I just continue to focus on improving myself, then more people around me will begin to see that I've improved myself, and they'll take interest in improving themselves, hopefully to some extent. And that's the way that I think we get that. We get the Supreme Court justices, we get the senators, we get and I'm not saying everyone should do plants, right? That's absolutely not that sounds a little too out there, right? But plants are an interesting modality, and they're science backed, right? So if we all focus on ourselves and really do what we can to remove negativity, to break through our mindset barriers that keep us grounded in these, keep us arguing on Facebook, it's all that stuff. Like, we need to do our own work so that we come out of that frame. And it sounds maybe a little bit utopian, but that's the key, is that we all do our own work with or without plants, and that raises the collective energy and vibration. And that's when we get the exponential relationship to bringing ourselves to a much better world.
I would totally agree. And I would also say, plant medicine can be chamomile tea.
Yeah.
It can be mint. It can be chocolate. Like, you can, with breath work, with stillness, meditation, deep thought, there's signaling and upregulation in the body that we can get from plants I can go get tomorrow, or I don't have to ingest the plants. There's amazing science to working with and growing plants and causing them to thrive, and life extension that we can see across the board of people ushering plants a healthy life. Relationship and harmony with nature, I think, is understated. Not everybody's in this, and again, a very unique situation in the world. Not everybody listening to the show is going to be able to go off and do a retreat, but there are things that you can access today, right now. If you're, and again, I think that the big teacher for me is, we have receptor sites. It's almost like, think about the floppy disk drive in your brain. You have a slot for these molecules in these plants.
Yeah.
You have them. They wouldn't work if you didn't. There's a reason why people respond this way in a favorable way. So honor that and have an awareness around it. Or even something as simple as breath. We breathe all day. Look up the work of Stan Groff, holotropic breath work. When LSD was banned as whatever schedule it was put on, Schedule 1 maybe, in the 70s, and some of these scientists doing work with psychedelics had to pivot to breath work. They found that they could actually take the body as high or higher in some situations with breathing patterns. Which I think it's fascinating. There's tons of ways to get in. So I would implore anybody hearing this to, you do not have to wait. Today is the day to start doing some of the work. And if this sounds like something that resonates, put it on your vision board.
Yeah.
And reach out and apply and do a consult and think about, maybe there's somebody, maybe it's not you, maybe it's a leader in your community that you think would benefit from this work. I think it's passing along the stuff that lights us up, saying this might not be for me, but it's for somebody in my circle. I have to say this, as you're talking about this, you're talking about coaches and people you love. There's a program that I've become aware of. I have a very good friend that went out and created a 12-step spiritual program called Be Loved Now. Mm-hmm. And it's the guided principles of bringing yourself back into true, unconditional, radical self-love. And again, this is at belovenow.org. It's a great similar program. And they're big retreat people. They love retreats. She's done, this is Kathy Wheelahan and Laura Young. They've done retreats all over the world. But I feel like you guys should get on a phone call.
Oh, I love that.
Because they're doing very, very, very similar work. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a collaboration somewhere for you, especially, and you're talking about the 8-week program, pre and post, that to continue the work on, year 1, year 2, that there might be a nice collaboration there. I mean, the highest level of quality stuff. Just coming right from source. So I think I definitely want to make that connection with you guys.
Awesome.
And I mean, Jonathan, I haven't been doing this lately. The Beautifully Broken podcast, the art of putting the pieces back together. I've had so many people answer this question in different ways. What does it mean to you to be beautifully broken?
It's a powerful question. I really like that. I think for me, a large part of that is acceptance, right? This work is not about rejecting what you are today. None of us should ever be rejecting what we are today, but we should be able to abstract ourselves and to become the watcher of ourselves, and then to become more aware of what we are bringing into this world. And so we are all beautifully broken in some way, shape, or form. Like, there's always something to work on. Like, that doesn't end. And so to constantly ask yourself, what is beautifully broken about me? And how might I like to look at that in a little bit finer detail, so that I can begin to see the things that come before the thing that I don't like, and begin to make those adjustments. And that's a gradual process that I think the Dalai Lama himself is still working on. So there's just no end to it. So it's exciting, and it's fun, because you can always find that finer little thing. You're still not cleaning up after yourself after this or that, or there's always this little things that you can just do to further improve yourself and how you're treating others and yourself. And so that to me, I think, is what being able to see the beauty in the brokenness means to me anyway.
Yeah, a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful answer. And then one more question, because you're so good at these. If you had a magic wand right now, and you could grant something to the world, and I'm personally experience a collective feeling of stress and anxiety. This is just my interpretation. But if you could gift something to the world with a magic wand, what would it be?
Ooh, that's a loaded question. I like this one. Can we hit the pause button for like 6 minutes?
Yeah, no, I think, totally. I can fill.
I would wish the world, each and every one of us in the world, to have a spiritual experience, because the messages that come to you with spiritual experiences, no one ever comes out of a spiritual experience and says, when I get home, I'm going to kick the cat, because that's what I was shown on my spiritual experience. That doesn't happen. When people have spiritual experiences, they have profound insights into the nature of themselves, into the nature of their relationships with others, and in relations to the universe. And they're wholly moving things in the right direction. And so that's incredible when we think about how is it that I'm getting insights that move things in the right direction as opposed to moving things in the wrong direction. Like, it implies some sort of higher order here, which is incredible, and many different ways that we can try to filter that. But I would wish upon everyone to have a spiritual experience for the beauty that it represents, and the universal wisdom and order that is fundamentally there for all of us to experience.
Beautiful. Jonathan, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. I assume we're going to stay in touch, and I'm always here as a resource if you need anything. And thank you for doing the work that you're doing and having the courage and bravery to step aside from, it sounds like, another path that you were really kicking ass in, and switching gears and being of service. I applaud you for that, and it's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thank you, Freddie. It's been a real pleasure, and I like our last one, and I'm sure like our next one. It's been a great conversation.
Great. Namaste, my friend.
Aloha.
Ladies and gentlemen, you made it to the end of the podcast, and here we are at season 2. I think this is the beginning of something really beautiful. So one way to support the podcast is to head over to freddiesetgo.com and check out Freddie's Faves, where I've linked every 5-star product and healing modality you hear about on the show. Most offer significant discounts by clicking the link or using the discount code. Please know they don't cost you anything extra, and at the same time, they support the podcast through affiliations. So check out Freddie's Faves on freddiesetgo.com. My heart honestly thanks you for tuning in. And if you've enjoyed today's show, head over to Apple Podcasts and leave a 5-star review. It gives us the virtual thumbs up that we're doing things right. If you want to connect with me directly, I'm on Instagram at FreddieSetGo or FreddieSetGo.com through email. Now, this is a message from my vast legal team of internet lawyers. The information on this podcast is for educational purposes only. By listening, you agree not to use the information found here as medical advice to treat any medical condition in yourself or others. Always consult your physician for any medical issues that you might be having. That's it for today. Our closing: the world is hurting. We need you at your very best. So take the steps today to always be upgrading. Remember, while life is pain, putting the fractured pieces back together is a beautiful process. I love you.